I'm from Franklin Middle School, and my project is on the triumph and tragedy of the War of 1812.
Years after the Revolutionary War, the United States of America and Great Britain were still at odds. Great Britain disliked the U.S. for trading and giving goods to France, while the Americans disliked Great Britain for capturing their merchant ships, taking their goods, and impressing their seamen to fight in their war against France. This set the stage for great moments in triumph and tragedy as the two countries declared war on each other, which we call today the War of 1812.
After many early skirmishes with British forces in Canada and on the Great Lakes, the war moved right here to the Mid-Atlantic region and the capital of the young United States, Washington, D.C. On August 24th, 1814, fresh off their victory at the Battle of Bladensburg, Major General Robert Ross of the British marched a group of redcoats into Washington, D.C. and occupied the city for 26 hours.
Since they had control of the city, they burned numerous important buildings such as the White House, Capitol Building, and 6 other public buildings. If not for a major storm called the Storm That Saved Washington, countless more artifacts and history would have been lost.
Meanwhile, President James Madison was forced to quickly flee to nearby Brookville, Maryland to keep the U.S. government intact, while his wife Dolly was instrumental in saving countless paintings and artifacts from the White House. Brookville is still known today as the United States Capitol for a day.
The tragedy of the burning of the U.S. Capitol was immense. The loss of life was minimal on both sides, but the major loss was Washington, D.C. itself. It would take years to rebuild the White House and other important government buildings. After the burning of Washington, D.C., the tide of the war turned with 2 more battles in Maryland, the Battle of North Point and the Battle of Baltimore, a great triumph for the United States that is now engraved in our history. At the Battle of North Point, Major General Robert Ross and the British Army sailed up the Chesapeake Bay with his soldiers and landed on the shores of Maryland at North Point. The area was already occupied by U.S. troops of the 3rd Brigade, led by General John Stricker. The British won the battle as the U.S. troops had to retreat, but the Americans were able to score a significant strategic victory. Major General Robert Ross, the most important general for the British, was killed. This created confusion within the soldiers, and an expected land attack on Baltimore never happened. While the British land forces waited at North Point, the superior British fleet sailed into the Baltimore harbor to try and take over the city. Baltimore in the early 1800s was a major shipping point for the new United States. It was said at that time that if Baltimore was lost, the U.S. would lose the war. The U.S. suffered major naval losses just in preparation for the attack at Baltimore, as they had to sink ships in the harbor before the British came. The U.S. sunk 4 Wasps, which are big ships used for war and trading goods in the 1800s.
The battle for Baltimore started in earnest on September 13, 1814, when the British brought a fleet of 16 ships and parked in the water where the modern-day Francis Scott Key Bridge stands, and started a bombardment of the fort at the south of the harbor's entrance. British Admiral Alexander Cochrane knew that to secure the city of Baltimore, they would have to take out the 5-star fort known as Fort McHenry.
Meanwhile, inside the fort, Major General George Armistead commanded about 1,000 American troops defending the fort from the raining of the British bombs and rockets. For 25 hours, the British fired rocket after rocket. The British had very strong naval cannons and fired about 1,500 to 2,000 bombs and rockets at the fort. The Americans were limited to cannons like these that could barely hit the ships in the British fleet. The soldiers in the fort also faced a challenge when the fleet launched a diversionary attack to distract the Americans so British soldiers could enter the east side of the city. Baltimore was prepared and repelled the attack. After 25 hours, the British fleet withdrew from the Baltimore port on September 14th, and the American flag was once again raised to fly high over the fort. With victory secured, there was a safeness in Baltimore, with only 4 deaths from the battle. As our flag was still there, Francis Scott Key felt the incredible relief of victory and wrote what we now know as our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. The Battle of Baltimore was won, and there was no more harm to the East Coast from the British. The British signed the Treaty of Ghent in December 1814, and the war would end with the Battle of New Orleans in January 1850. What defines tragedy for the War of 1812? For America, it was the tragedy of watching their capital being occupied and burned. Of course, the biggest tragedy was the loss of life. 2,260 Americans were killed and another 4,500 wounded in the 3-year pursuit between the two countries. But in total, the War of 1812 should be viewed as a major triumph for the United States of America. They found a rallying cry in the new anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. They showed that they had a strong army and militia and could stand on their own 2 feet. They were able to fend off the British and prove that the United States could be an independent country. America could finally handle itself in a world affairs.
I'm wondering how you decided to select the musical selections that you did.
So the Star-Spangled Banner, it was written on site during the Battle of Baltimore, which was the key battle that basically ended the War of 1812, and it protected Baltimore, and it was the rallying cry of the Americans and the new country after they just defeated one of the best naval country in the world at that time.
And how about the other musical?
So I see like back then the music they would have like drums and flutes and that kind of stuff, and that would be the colonial music that they would have during marches and stuff like that. So I chose to put that in there too at the beginning.
Emerson, did you have I see in your process paper that you had some interest in the War of 1812 as a visiting Fort McHenry prior to that.
Yeah.
Did you look at any other topics as well, or is this one just drilled right in?
I knew right from the point I went on the website and I looked at the theme, and I knew that this would fit in because of the tragedy of losing Washington and the triumph of the Battle of Baltimore and how they defeated the British at the Baltimore port, not letting them even get a good land attack on Baltimore.
Did you discover in your research any new information that you found fascinating that might be for future research?
I didn't know much about the battle or the burning of Washington at that time, so I took this as an opportunity to learn more about that, and I learned about the storm that came through after and put out the flames at the Capitol building and the White House, and I also learned that the president and his family, they were supposed to have people over and they were supposed to have dinner that night. So the Redcoats, they went in the White House, they ate all that, there was wine out, they had the wine, and then they set it on fire.
And those are the kind of the neat things you pick up, those sort of vignettes from history that bring color, right, to the black and white story of history.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that Brookville, Maryland was the national capital for a day informally. So I'm actually going to be traveling past there this afternoon, and I'm going to make my way stop in Brookville and find that sign.
In your process paper, you mentioned a document from the Major General George Armistead. Were there other kinds of documents that you were finding that also made you, really excited about this project?
So there was that one report on the battle from Fort McHenry that he wrote himself, and then there was also a letter to his family that he wrote, and that was saying like what happened at the battle, like how the soldiers were reacting, and those kind of things.
Where did you find that document? Do you remember what site you found
The
it on?
National Archives.
National Archives. I imagine there were lots of important sources there that you were able to find. Great. Thank you, Emerson.
Thank you, Emerson.